In Canada, the median priced home for the very important prime home buying age group of 25 to 34-year-olds costs a whopping 20 times the yearly salary for that group. That is well and above what any rational person would consider affordable. And it is one of the main reasons why homeownership for this same group has fallen from over 55% at the turn of the century to just a little above 40% today. And if we look at Canadians as a whole, at the turn of the century, the median priced home cost a little over 5 times the yearly household income. Today, it is over 10 times the yearly household income. Again, far and above what any rational person would consider affordable. And that brings me to the topic of today's video. Canada is going through a major, and most likely the worst, housing market crisis of its history. And as an American, here we are also experiencing a real estate crisis. But I think our brothers and sisters above the north border are going through something even more severe. And in this video, I want to cover why this is happening, because it is a complex issue that molds everything from housing supply shortages to immigration, legal immigration, into one major problem that has caused the issues they're experiencing today. So I want to cover this in depth, and I also want to go over some potential fixes, because if Canada doesn't fix this issue, they're well on their way to having a generation with one of the lowest home ownership rates in their history, and a generation that will honestly have a very difficult time building wealth, which will have major repercussions for the entire Canadian economy. So with that said, as always, my name is Derek, and I got my degree in finance, so you don't have to. Let's break this down in depth. So first and foremost, some of the important numbers. In the year 2000, the median priced home was a little over $163,000. But today, that same median priced home is over $700,000. This is an over 300% increase, while at the same time, the median household income has only increased a little over 100%. This creates a massive problem across the country, but in heavily urbanized areas like Toronto and Vancouver, the issues are multiplied even further. Some of the price to income ratios for homes in these city centers exceed 15 times the median household yearly income. And of course, I'm going to explain to you exactly why this is happening. But before we get there, we have to talk about the rental market as well, because even here, the situation is not much better. The average rent for a one-bedroom apartment across Canada has surpassed $2,000 per month. That is a 13% increase alone from just last year. And in Vancouver, that same one-bedroom apartment, $2,800 a month. In Toronto, $2,500 a month. And that's for a one-bedroom. And even in smaller areas like Hamilton and Halifax, they're experiencing annual price increases of somewhere between 10 and 15%. Far outpacing wage increases. In fact, in many areas, rent now exceeds 50% of renters' income, far above the recommended 30%. And this puts a massive strain on these individuals to make other purchases like essential goods or even just free time activities, which of course lowers the standard of living. And on top of that, while this issue affects all Canadians, you are seeing a generational divide, with baby boomers increasing their net worth through home equity an average of $250,000 over the last decade, while millennials are struggling to build a nest egg to begin with. So I'm sure at this point you can see the severity of the situation. The problem is that if Canada continues down this road, it'll only get worse. So this, of course, begs the question, why? Why is this happening? Well, it's a mix of housing shortages, immigration, and investor activity. So let's break down this complex situation, and then let's talk about how they're going to fix it if they even can. So first and foremost, we have to understand the Canadian economy. The Canadian economy relies heavily on immigration for economic growth, not just in the labor force, but in economic growth in general. And because of this, Canada admits upwards of 400,000 immigrants on a yearly basis. Now, Canada does have what's known as a merit-based entrance system, which means that it tries to admit only the best and most qualified immigrants to, of course, help boost its economy. And in fact, immigration accounts for up to 98% of Canada's labor force growth. And it's also been seen as essential to counter the effects of an aging population on the labor force. Here's the thing though, regardless of how qualified these immigrants are, they are still people, and people need housing. And here is where the first issue to this major problem begins to show itself. Immigration is handled by Canada's top branch of government, similar to the federal government here. The problem is housing, which means building houses, and zoning laws are controlled by individual provinces and sometimes individual municipalities, which means if there is not perfect communication between these two branches of government, then you might end up with a supply and demand mismatch, which is exactly what is happening. It is estimated right now that Canada is short about 3.5 million homes. And in order to just equalize prices, not fix the issue, but just bring equilibrium to the market, Canada needs to build a whopping 1.2 million homes at the bare minimum by 2030. So why? Why are they short so many homes? Well, one is because of this supply and demand mismatch between the two branches of government. But on top of that, since 2016, Canada has built the least amount of homes per capita of all the G7 nations. And one of the major reasons for this is zoning and zoning laws. Up to 70% of urban land in Canada is currently zoned for single-family residences. This, of course, is the least efficient form of housing when you have massive population growth. So because they have favored single-family residences, there has not been enough construction of apartments and townhomes and condos, which are easier to fit on a smaller land footprint, like the ones found in Vancouver and Toronto and Quebec, which you'll see has actually caused another issue when we talk about investors and their part to play in this whole issue. Now, to give Canada credit, their government has vowed to lower the rate of immigration into the country to try and help this supply and demand imbalance. With that said, the issue is already here. Even if they stopped immigration completely, which means that not only is it a federal government problem, but it is also a province and municipality issue, and they need to start changing their zoning laws to at least allow some more apartments, condos, and townhomes to be built, which, again, to give them credit, have said that they are going to do. But of course, because of bureaucratic red tape, progress is extremely slow. Okay, now let's turn the lens to investors, because investors do have a part to play in this whole mess. And firstly, we have to talk about how this relates to zoning. Since 70% of urbanized land is zoned for single-family residences, builders have been incentivized to build single-family homes. And of course, it's logical for builders to want to maximize profit, which means if they're given the choice to build smaller homes or build larger, more luxury homes with higher profit margins, they're going to build the latter. And that's exactly what's happened in some of these urban city centers. There are a ton of expensive luxury homes that the average Canadian cannot purchase. But you know who can purchase these homes? Foreign and domestic investors, either wealthy individuals or corporations. And because of this, over the last few years, investors have spent tens of billions of dollars acquiring Canadian real estate in city centers. In fact, it's estimated that 1 in 5 properties in Canada is investor owned, and that ratio only gets worse in city centers like Vancouver and Toronto. And because of this investor activity, of course, the average supply that's actually on market is lowered. So you have multiple issues causing this major crisis. You have too much immigration with not enough homes being built. You have zoning laws that are basically prohibiting more land-efficient housing options like apartments from going up. And then you have investors who are buying luxury homes which have been built because builders have been incentivized to focus on single-family properties, and of course they're going to maximize profit by making these single-family properties as luxurious as possible. So as long as demand for these luxury properties exists from wealthy investors, that's what's going to be built until zoning laws are changed. And of course, all of this by itself would be a problem. But on top of that, you have worldwide inflation, which again, as an American, we have experienced here. But that inflation has led to higher interest rates for mortgages. Right now, the average mortgage rate in Canada is above 6%. So when you couple that with a $700,000 plus median priced home, you get a $4,000 plus mortgage that is just unattainable and unaffordable for most Canadians, especially those in the prime home buying age of 25 to 34 years old. And to add insult to injury, what does this do? Well, it causes labor shortages in city centers because those employees and those workforce members are forced to move because they cannot afford to live in city centers any longer. And of course, it's very difficult to look 5 or 10 years into the future. But if we try to presume and speculate as best as we can, if Canada does not alter course, they are on track for a major financial crisis at some point and major economic declines at some point because the workforce, through immigration that they rely on, has to be halted or slowed down because of the lack of housing. This is assuredly going to cause a problem in the future if they do not course correct, which then begs the question, how? How do they course correct and how do they fix this? Well, of course, they must increase the supply, which is hard to do because of bureaucratic red tape and of course because of current homeowners who want to keep their home values high by limiting the growth of apartments or townhouses in their neighborhoods. But again, to give Canada some credit, they have said that they are working on these issues by one, reducing the red tape and approval times for permits, and of course by changing zoning laws. Canada has vowed to lower the percentage of urbanized land that falls under single-family residence zoning laws. They've also proposed ideas such as vacancy taxes, which would add a tax to vacant properties, which in theory would stop some speculative buying from these investors who are literally just holding these homes so they appreciate. Some other ideas that have been floated include limiting or banning foreign ownership of property, because a lot of investors that own these speculative properties and just keep them off market are foreign. But if you ask me, in reality, the major problem is a massive lack of supply for the current population. And the problem with that is the sheer amount of homes that need to be built to fix this issue. At least 1.2 million just to equalize the market by 2030, and in reality closer to 3.5 million homes. That means apartments, townhomes, condos, or single-family residences that need to be built to solve the issue. The fact of the matter is it takes an extreme amount of time, red tape, zoning changes, etc. to actually make this happen, which means this issue is going to be there for many years to come. And it really just becomes a ticking clock. Are they going to be able to solve these issues in time to prevent a major financial crisis? I, of course, don't have a magic 8-ball and don't know the answer to this. But what I do know is that in reality, they have probably about 5 years. Any longer than that, And these issues are only going to be made worse and are only going to exponentially cause problems on the Canadian economy, which heavily relies on immigration for it to grow. And as I've stated in previous videos, our entire capitalist society relies on countries' abilities to grow GDP. Because if you cannot grow GDP, then investments and retirement accounts fall apart. So while this is a major issue right now, it'll only get worse if it's not solved. I hope this video was informative, and I hope it gave you a clear picture as to what is happening in the Canadian real estate market and why it's happening. If it did, please consider subscribing, as it helps the channel tremendously. And if you like personal finance, world economics, and investing broken down simply, you are in the right place, so I hope to see you in the next video. Until then, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.